Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. I am so happy you are listening. This is a place where I talk about cutting edge health and wellness trends, things that I see that are going on, things that I'm into in this space. And I am your host, Brittany Ford, if you are new here. So definitely welcome. This episode is all about hacking your sleep in kind of a new way and a different take on it. I've talked about sleep a lot before, but today I was joined by Devin Burke, and he is recognized as one of the top 10 coaches of 2023. And he focuses on sleep. And we actually talked about a few different things that I actually took away from this that I wasn't implementing beforehand. So you'll hear me kind of go through them in the podcast episode, things that I'm surprised at, things that I've now tweaked since doing this interview. One of the biggest ones that I did that I've changed was looking at my clock. So essentially, I wake up multiple times throughout the night, and I would always get up and look at my phone and look at the time on my phone. Now, I have my phone completely set to red, so there's no blue light that comes through it. My analog clock that I did have has broken, so I need a new one from Amazon. But even with the analog clock, I would still look at the time. And he talks about why that is not helpful and why it can actually be stressful and anxiety inducing. And it's actually made such a difference for me to stop doing that. So I just get up now. I don't know what time it is, and I don't make decisions based on how much time I have left over or what I think I might have left over. Because what was happening before was say I would wake up to pee at I don't know, even 4:30 or even 5, maybe 4:30 or 4. I would lie in bed after. Then sometimes my mind would start racing and running. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, I might as well get up because I know the time and I'm going to get up in a few hours anyway. So what's the difference of me getting up right now? But now, without looking at the time, I am not doing that. I'm not on the clock. I'm not tracking, oh, I woke up an hour ago. I woke up, I'm going to get up again in 30 minutes. There's less of this schedule that I'm on. And I think I actually am sleeping more now because of it. Because it can just induce anxiety of oh, maybe I should get up and start my day. But also on the other side of keeping track of how many times you're getting up or waking up. So I woke up at 2, and you look at the clock again when you get up, and now it's 3. Wow, I'm getting up at every hour, right? And then those thoughts kind of start tumbling together. So I've completely taken out any time tracking, and I didn't even think to do that until this episode. So thank you, Devin, for that tip, and I have definitely implemented now. There are a ton of golden nuggets in this. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. We can all improve our sleep. I think we all go through phases of sleeping well and not sleeping well. And we talk about postpartum sleeping, new parents. How do you figure that out with a partner? Do you share a bed? Do you take naps during the day? Do you have one person on, one person off? All of these different things. So it's really helpful kind of going through that. He's been there and he definitely understands that. So I think you will definitely get a lot out of this episode. Before we dive in, I want to read the DM of the day. So this is just a segment where people write in to the show. Or actually, no, they don't even write into the show. They send me a DM on Instagram and then I read some of them on here. And so this person writes, "Hey, Brittany, your podcast discussions on intermittent fasting have piqued my interest. I've recently started experimenting with it, inspired by your insights on its potential benefits for metabolic health and energy levels." Yes, I did a full episode on that actually, on metabolic health. "I'm particularly curious about how intermittent fasting might affect women differently than men, considering hormonal fluctuations and other biological factors. Have you come across any research or anecdotal evidence that speaks to this? Your perspective would be incredibly valuable as I continue to explore this approach, blah, 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 blah. Thank you so much." Yes. So I actually just did a podcast episode on this. It should be out by now, by the time that this airs. Look it up. I think it's called Metabolic Flexibility Unveiled or something. And we talk about intermittent fasting, and we talk about intermittent fasting for women. And I have an expert doctor on the show. And we go through that. So definitely go and listen to that thoroughly because there's a lot here to unpack. Unfortunately, intermittent fasting for women is not as great, especially if you are in your fertile years versus men. There are a lot of health ramifications from it if you do it too much. And I know because that happened to me about 5 years ago. So you want to just be more careful. You want to be considerate. And there are ways to fast. And I talk about this in that episode. You can do like 1 or 2 days a week spaced out. You can do longer fasts once a month when you're not ovulating or on your period. You can do shorter fasts, right? So like 12 hours overnight versus like 16 or something more like that. Now, obviously, you don't get as much benefit, but it is still better than nothing. So stuff like that. There are things that you can do and that will help you get the cellular health benefits and the metabolic benefits as well. Go listen to that episode. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence on this for sure, even like myself, the way that I speak about it and my experience. And then obviously there is a lot to say. There is some research, but we're really not at that point because as you probably know, most research is done on men. And so a lot of the fasting research has been done on men. Okay, I hope that kind of pointed you in the right direction. I don't want to go too deeply into it right now. And a shout out to Wellness. That is Wellness Mama, who's Katie Wells. Her company is called Wellness. And she has a line of toothpaste that I absolutely love. They do make a kids one. I know you guys were asking about that. And essentially, it is fluoride free. It is all natural and it uses ingredients that actually still work. So that's the really key part here is like some of the natural ones, they don't taste good. They don't foam. They don't, you know what I mean? Like they don't do the job. They don't make your teeth cleaner. They don't help whiten them. But hers really, really do. And that's why I think they kind of have like a cult of following at this point. I have tried every flavor. I think they're all great. And this is the only toothpaste that I currently use. So if you use my discount code biohackingbrittany, you get 12% off at checkout. I think that's for all of her products, but her toothpaste is like one of the most well-known ones. Toothpaste is tricky, right? Like you read the ingredients and you think, oh, this natural toothpaste is better, but you really have to do the research behind it, what those ingredients mean, and you really have to trust the brand that it's coming from. I think there's like a lot of greenwashing in the space now. People just throwing the word natural on things and assuming it's better. It's not always the case. So definitely do your research. And Wellness is the one that I like. So that's spelled WELLNESSE.com. And yeah, use my code. And shout out to Qualia. I know you love the longevity and aging supplements, and Qualia definitely is part of that. They have a senolytic supplement that I take 2 days every month. It's only 2 days, which is awesome because my supplement stack is getting long and big. So essentially, it helps turn over senescent cells, gets rid of the old cells, makes space for the new. And that's really, really important when we are thinking about aging and cellular health. Senescent cells is actually one of the 12 hallmarks of aging. So like the accumulation of them and how quickly we can turn them over. And one of the ways that we can do that is through a product supplement like Senolytic from Qualia, which has things in it like quercetin and fisetin. And this kind of helps clean out those old cells and bring in the new ones. So use my discount code biohackingbrittany. I think it gets you an extra 15% off, even if they have sales. So I love that for you. Check it out and enjoy this episode on sleep. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. And I will catch you soon for another one. Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. Thank you for listening today. I am so excited about this episode. We are diving into all things sleep. And I think I know quite a bit about sleep, but honestly, I am no expert and I just do whatever I can to help me get through the night. So we are bringing on an expert, Devin Burke, who is recognized as one of the top 10 coaches of 2023 in the US. He is a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, renowned sleep coach, and founder of the Sleep Science Academy. He also has a really interesting holistic approach to sleep, which we're going to dive into, called the dynamic sleep recalibrating. which I can't wait to hear all about. So, Devin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. I'm excited to talk about sleep without putting the listeners to sleep while they're listening to
Yes.
this. So
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be very interesting. And I was just telling you before we hopped on that I just had a nap before this because I am very pregnant and trying to listen to my body when it wants more sleep and do that sort of thing. But before we get into all of your recommendations and tips and all these things, I would love to know, like, why sleep? Like, how did you get to that point in your career where you're like, okay, I really want to focus on sleep?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not really the most exciting topic until you actually understand it, really. I mean, to be honest, I'm an amazing sleeper. I'm like one of those gifted people that can sleep anywhere. Like I could sleep on a bench, I could sleep. So it wasn't from my own struggle. It was actually through someone specifically that I was working with about 7 years ago. So before I founded Sleep Science Academy and dove into sleep science and sleep coaching and sleep psychology and all the things we do now, I was working with a lot of high performing individuals, people that ran companies, really just super successful, high drive type of individuals, more so life health coach. And a lot of these people, they had sleep issues, but not at the level of issue that this one particular person I was working with did. And so he didn't want to take sleeping pills. He had tried some sleeping pills and he's like, "Hey, what do you know about sleep?" And I'm like, "Well, I know I'm an amazing sleeper, but I know nothing else about sleep because I just take it for granted." So long story short, I started to dive into, what's available for this, people that struggle with sleep, what's available for this person. I kept just coming across sleeping pills and I'm like, this is not the answer. Then I discovered something called CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I started to look into some of the techniques and the strategies. And I said, okay, I get why some of this works. And so, but I also saw some holes in that kind of psychology and methodology. So I was like, okay, how can we kind of like fill some of the things that I think aren't necessarily the most beneficial for someone's sleep within this kind of methodology? Long story short, started studying all these different things, started experimenting with my client, started to get some results. And then I started to get some results for other people that struggle with sleep. And then I was like, okay, I'm on to something here. And really, it just was so fascinating when you start to really understand how important sleep is and what happens when we sleep and the impact of what happens when we don't sleep. And so that kind of really piqued my interest. And then so that led me to really just committing to supporting as many people as I can to restore their natural ability to sleep.
Nice. I love that. And I think sleep is still so underrated. Like I think more and more people are talking about it, but I I don't think it's where it should be. I think for people like I'm in a health space and so are you. Like I think we understand, obviously you do, like the importance of sleep. But why do you think the average person might kind of roll their eyes or just like not really pay much attention to it? And there's that saying that's like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like, why do you think people kind of have this notion about sleep like that?
Yeah, as a culture, we see it as almost like a weak habit for low performers. As soon as you lose, sleep when you're dead. You hear all these kind of cultural connotations that are connected to sleep in a negative light. And I think that really is, well, one, that's come from ignorance, just not really fully understanding how important sleep is. But I think it's from American culture, specifically in America. It's really hustle, achieve, let's produce, let's make money. And so from a cultural standpoint, like you're not really necessarily making money or producing while you're sleeping. Although I will say, if you're sleeping better, you're going to make more money and you're absolutely going to produce more during those waking hours. And we can talk about that. But yeah, so I think there's the culture aspect of it. And then just the big misunderstanding around why it's important, what happens when we sleep. And so many people it's ignorance really. So those two things I think are the reason why most people really just don't really prioritize it. They don't protect it. But now, like you said, the tides are shifting. More people are getting interested in sleep. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's now cool to be a good sleeper. There's all these devices, right? Celebrities are talking about it. They're having like sleep wars, like Jennifer Aniston versus Kim Kardashian. It's kind of made its way into pop culture. And there also has been some really powerful, successful people like Jeff Bezos who kind of have spoken openly about how important sleep is to them. And so as a culture, we look to celebrities, we look to pop culture, we look to super successful people, and we kind of follow their lead. So I think the tides are turning for sure. And there's still a long way to go for people to really understand how incredible sleep actually is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is getting better. And I also think with the wearables that have come out and the tech around sleep, I think that has also shifted it as well. So, like when I got my Aura ring about 5 years ago, when I started to actually see the data on myself and how I was sleeping, that was really what changed for me when I was like, "Oh, okay, I actually do need to wear blue blockers at night and get blackout curtains." And, I'm waking up 5 times a night. Why am I doing that?" And so I really had to see it like on an app and sit and look at my bad scores and then be like, "Okay, there's something I need to do here." And I don't know if most people are like that, but do you kind of find that with your clients? Like, I guess, like, do you even recommend people use wearables, or what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I like to give the analogy for wearables. If you understand actually what to do with the data, they can be extremely helpful. And at Sleep Science Academy, we do have our clients use wearable tech to show them while they're making the lifestyle and the mental changes and the behavioral changes, the impact of what those changes actually create. And it can be very detrimental if you do not understand how to actually impact change within the given area that you're tracking. So if people are tracking their sleep and it keeps telling you, okay, you're not getting enough deep sleep, you're not getting enough REM sleep, you're not getting enough sleep, you're waking up, you're tossing and turning, you're restless, your HRV is in the gutter. And then what can happen is people start trying, I call it like the sleep shotgun approach. They try everything under the sun to try to improve their sleep. And it creates this sort of sleep phobia, like this pressure, this performance anxiety around sleep. And the more things they try and the more things they try that really don't move the needle, the more worried they get and the more anxious they become. And then that becomes the whole reason why their sleep actually becomes worse. So it's easy for people to fall into that trap where they're hyper fixated on sleep. But I think that it's really valuable. Like if you went to a doctor and you got your blood work back and it's like, okay, you have high cholesterol and you have low testosterone. Okay, here are our options. We can put you on some hormone replacement therapy. I can put you on blood pressure medication, or you can change your diet. You can start going to the gym, lifting weights. You can make these lifestyle interventions that would be, and then you can go back and you can see, okay, did those things actually make a difference? So when you have that data, I think data is really, really powerful if you have the proper support. Without the proper support, it can be negative. With the proper support, it can be super powerful and effective.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's like you have to know what to do with the data, right? And you have to be able to understand it and even know what any of that means. But luckily, there's people like you out there now who are experts and they can listen to podcasts like this so that they can like easily get educated in a short amount of time. I'm curious what you recommend for those couples who are potentially on different sleep wavelengths, we'll say. So, for example, my husband and I are very similar. Like, we like to go to bed early, and I get up usually earlier than he does in the morning, but he loves his sleep. So, like, in the winter, we go to bed at like 8:30. In the summer, we kind of struggle with it a bit more because the daylight, and we always read before we go to bed. So, like, we are very much on the same wavelength. But I have friends who are like, I go to sleep at 9 and he comes to bed at midnight and then it wakes me up, and he doesn't want to go to bed early, but he doesn't care about sleep as much. And so how do you kind of like, how do people work on that when one maybe values sleep more than the other, or maybe one person is more of a night owl, if that even exists, and the other person isn't?
Yeah, it's definitely it can be a point of contention within a relationship, and there are definitely some insight and strategies that I'll share here about that specifically. I think the first thing would be to really have a conversation with your partner about expectation and about what you value. Because I could give you all these different strategies of what to do, like, hey, sleep in a separate bedroom or get two different mattresses and you can put them together so that there's not, when the person comes to bed, there's not so much disturbance of movement of the mattress, or get some light tech where you can turn on the light, you can still see, so you're not falling all over, tripping over shoes and stuff, but you're not waking the other person up. So there's absolutely, there's strategies. And I think those strategies they work and they can be very helpful. But really at the end of the day, it really, I think, having that clear communication with your partner about what you value and what's important, that's like the starting place. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, how can we coexist in a way where we both meet our sleep needs and we're also still able to connect to be intimate? Because the bed is in the bedroom, really, there's only two things that really should be happening there. It's making love to your bed partner and sleeping. And so what can happen when people have different sleep schedules is it gets in the way of intimacy, and then that can really affect the relationship. What also can happen is that, as you mentioned, if someone likes to go to bed earlier and then someone comes in later, there can be some real frustration from the bed partner that's sleeping and then all of a sudden awake because the other partner's not being as considerate. And again, that's really where it comes down to just having clear communication of like, hey, this is important to me. What strategies are you willing to implement? And even sleeping in separate bedrooms. I think that there's nothing wrong with sleeping in separate beds, sleeping in separate bedrooms, as long as it doesn't get in the way of intimacy. Because that's the big thing. Like if it's getting in the way of you being intimate, then that's definitely going to have an impact on your relationship.
Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity, let's be honest. The aging process, however, is not our friend when it comes to endless energy and productivity, and that's why I use Qualia Senolytic. If someone had told me that there are science-backed ingredients that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I would not have believed it until I tried this. As we age, everyone accumulates these senescent cells in our bodies. They're also kind of known as zombie cells. They are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like getting rid of dead leaves off of a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn out senescent cells to allow for the rest of them to thrive in the body. The best part is you actually only need to take it 2 days a month. When I have taken this, I've had higher energy levels. I have been more productive, felt more enthusiastic in life, and also had less aches and pains. So resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic right now. Go to qualialife.com/Brittany for up to 50% off, which is wild. And use code Brittany at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's Qualia, spelled Qualia, life.com/Brittany for an extra 15% off of your purchase. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode, and I will definitely be taking my share this month. Yeah, I think those are great points. And I think, the communication, talking about your values and that sort of thing works. And then separate bedrooms as well, like maybe it's temporary. So for like right now, we have, as I was saying, we have a baby coming, and my husband and I were talking about like sleep and me being up multiple times a night. And does it make sense for him to sleep in the bed with me and also be up multiple times when, like, to be honest, he's not really needed as much, right? And so it doesn't make sense for both of us to be sleep deprived every single day. So now we're talking about, okay, like maybe you sleep in the guest bedroom and maybe you do the night shifts on these days. And so it's not ideal. Like we don't want to do that, but our values are health, right? And he will be healthier and he can be more supportive during the day if he gets to sleep at night, and then I can sleep during the day. And so it's just about that compromise. I'm curious what you would recommend for couples like us who are about to go through this phase of a newborn waking up multiple times throughout the night.
Yeah, I mean And to your point about what you just shared, I mean, that's the perfect example of clear communication and clear values. Like what you just, like the example you give your husband, that's like amazing that you guys are on the page like that and have an open communication. Sleep with young children, especially newborns, it's gonna be rocky. I mean, there's really two times everyone at some point in their life experiences sleep challenge. One of those periods, if you have kids, is during that time. And there's really no getting around it. I mean, I always like to tell new parents, just keep reminding yourself that it's temporary because what often can happen is the worst thing is your baby then gets on a good sleep rhythm, is sleeping through the night, and then for whatever reason, you're not. And that's what we want to avoid, right? While your baby's waking up because they need to be, fed and all the things, soothed, they, it's going to be rocky. Like your sleep's going to be rocky. And guess what? The human body is super resilient. And it's that time is a short amount of time. It's going to pass. So the thing I always like to say is don't get overly focused or worried about it and just really don't make it a big deal. Like, yes, you're probably going to be feeling way more tired. Yes, you might feel a little bit more irritable and on edge. And that's part of being a new parent. There's not really, that's the sacrifice I think that comes along with bringing a life into the world. And it passes. So I there's not really that much more I can share, but I just know that my friends that have young children, that's been helpful advice just to constantly remind themselves like, hey, this is just a temporary thing. And then to have that communication like you and your husband have of like, hey, how can we sort of tag team this so that we're not both sleep deprived so that we can kind of, support each other through the difficult time, which will pass.
I love that. It's almost like just accepting it rather than trying to like change it, I think is so, so smart. And also just kind of gives you grace, right? It's like you were saying earlier about like, being so stressed about trying to sleep perfectly. It's like then you're just up more and you're worried about it more and accepting that this is temporary. Yeah, my sleep is going to suck for a few months, but you know what? We're going to get through it. And then things look out easier as the baby gets older, I think is just a really nice way to look at it and probably something I should like write down and remember.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's not just for new parents. That is really, really important for people that are really have chronic insomnia we found that one of the most amazing, and I don't think it's not really a strategy or a tool. Acceptance is more of a way of being. And so, because you can intellectualize it and be like, okay, I'm just going to accept this. Or you can actually be a person, like physically be a person in the world that accepts things as they are. And when you actually can practice that, not only do you sleep like amazingly well, but life just gets a lot lighter and there's more space and more understanding. And it was actually one of the surprising things I found that has the biggest impact on people's sleep that really, really struggle with sleep. I'm talking like 2 to 3 hours a night for months, weeks, in some cases, decades. When they really understand that you really can't force or control sleep, and there's going to be nights where you wake up, but if you can just accept I'm awake and I will get back to sleep, my body knows how to sleep, it creates the greatest opportunity for sleep to happen. And then you don't fall into the trap of trying to force or control it and do things to like make yourself sleep, which then just creates more pressure, more hyperarousal, and then solidifies that pattern, which we want to break. So it's really important, I think, for people to get that, because it's not something that I think it doesn't come natural to humans to accept things because we think of it as like resignation or giving up. And there's a big distinction between acceptance, full acceptance, and resignation. Like you can be in action and still be in acceptance versus resignation is kind of like you are giving up. There's no possibility for change. With acceptance, there's a lot of possibility for change, but you also acknowledge what's available and present right here, right now, without a story attached to it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like, how do you balance acceptance versus like optimization, even? Like, when I think about sleep, I'm like, okay, like I was saying, like I do all these things to help me sleep better at night, which is like optimizing my sleep environment, which does make me sleep better. But then at the same time, like, how do I accept that I am going to wake up multiple times and I'm not going to always have perfect sleep. And like, how do you find that balance of, I don't know, trying to sleep better, but also not being so obsessed or neurotic about it, I guess, especially as people who are like kind of sounds like the clients that you probably work with of like high performers, type A people who just want everything dialed in exactly. And then you just say, oh, just accept that you're not going to be able to sleep perfectly all the time. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are,
Yeah, I
do
totally
they
get
just
it.
like stare at you and they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, it's definitely here's the thing that like there is a balance to it. So of course, having sleep hygiene and doing things to prepare for sleep and having an optimized sleep environment, all of those things really can help with the quality and depth of your sleep. But what I found, Brittany, which is really interesting, it's not just what we do, it's how we think about what we do that makes the difference. And specifically in the realm of sleep. So there's nothing per se wrong with taking magnesium, taking a hot bath, having blackout curtains, having a really comfortable mattress, having a bedtime ritual. There's nothing wrong with that. That actually you're setting your body up for success. But if you start to develop this, again, like this hyper obsession with trying to perfect sleep, or like this expectation of I'm going to do all these things and then I'm going to sleep amazing, that's where the mind actually can get in the way of the body doing the most natural thing in the world, which is sleep. There's people, and this is the truth. There are millions of people, literally millions of people tonight that are going to do all the wrong things and they're going to still sleep. Now, could they sleep better if they were doing more of the right things, quote unquote? Of course. But that tells us something. It's like sleep is this natural biological process. There's nothing too good to be true about sleeping. And if you're overthinking about it, or you're worried about it, you're trying to perfect it, there's diminishing returns to a point with that type of mindset. And so, like everything, it's just really understanding yourself, understanding your, where you are with your health and your sleep journey. But I like to put people in buckets. There's the people that have true sleep issues, like they've tried all the doctors and the therapies and all the sleep hygiene and the devices, and they're still struggling to either fall or stay asleep. And then there's people that are like much smaller bucket. This one's like a teeny tiny bucket. The people that sleep really well, but they just want to continue to sleep even better. And the advice that I give for both of these buckets, it's a little bit, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, it's a lot of bit different. Because what works for the bucket of, I'm sleeping well, but I want to sleep better, isn't really necessarily going to work. It actually could be the very thing that gets in the way for this other bucket of people that are trying all these things and these things are not working. So it's important to kind of have a distinction between the different types of sleepers out there.
Yeah. I think that's so fair. Like there's insomnia and then there's, oh, I just want to, sleep a little bit 10% better, but I'm already a great sleeper, right? So I think that's a totally fair comparison to make. What do you think about people? I guess I'll ask the first one. What do you think about sleep aids that you can buy in the store to help you sleep? Like things like Gravel or Benadryl or those type of things that maybe aren't super great, but people use them. Do you think it's okay every once in a while, or would you say try to steer clear from them?
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for sleeping aids. And what the danger is that people then rely on them. So that's where it becomes dangerous. If you think you need something in order to sleep, like I need my Benadryl or NyQuil or I don't sleep, that's an issue. If once in a while you're having some occasional insomnia or sleep issues and you're using it just to kind of restabilize and you're not like attaching yourself to it, it's a totally different story. Sleeping medication and sleeping aids, really, they're not meant to be used long term, but unfortunately most people develop these dependencies on them. One, because depending on what we're talking about, they actually can be addicting. But really it's like people are putting their power, I say, like putting your power in a pill, where it's like you're trusting something outside of yourself versus trusting that you can sleep. Like there's nothing, you're relying on something external versus something that's innate and natural. And that to me is also a danger of using sleeping aids. Again, it's not just what you do, it's how you think about what you do that makes the difference. And that is 100% true when we're talking about sleeping aids or supplements or sleeping medication.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I have a family member who he's on a pharmaceutical sleep aid. I don't know what it is, but he went through a phase of being addicted to it. Like it was every single night. I'm not sure if he still takes it. I don't think so, but I know they can be very addictive even if it's and I actually don't know this. I don't know if it's like the ingredient itself is addictive or if it's like placebo effect of like you're saying I have to take this one thing. I mentally think I cannot sleep without this. So therefore I will keep myself awake. Oh, because I haven't taken it. Do you know what I mean? Like, or is it,
It's
yeah,
both.
both, or the chemical ingredient itself is addictive. Yeah. So I, it's tricky with that. It's tricky with sleep because if you take a sleep aid and say you sleep 8 hours beautifully, like you're going to want to do that every night. Right.
Yeah. Well, yes. And most of those sleeping, the most popular ones are in a group called the sedatives. And there's a difference between sedation and sleep. Like, so you might get 8 hours of sleep, but that 8 hours, you're not getting into the deeper stages of delta and REM sleep because it's almost like the equivalent of drinking alcohol. Like, yeah, alcohol can make you tired and sleepy, but it's proven. There's many studies that prove that it gets in the way of rapid eye movement sleep. And so that's a really important stage of sleep. And so just like using alcohol, using medication, specifically in the class of sedatives, is going to eventually, you're not going to be feeling as restored or rested. And eventually they all stop working regardless. So that's the thing. People build up a tolerance to these medications. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying this isn't medical advice. And I will say that there is a time and a place for them. And but you need to really address the underlying causes of why the most natural thing in the world isn't happening in the first place versus just relying on a pill and a pill that doesn't allow your body to get into these deeper stages of sleep. That's the answer doesn't lie in a pill. It really doesn't.
If you're feeling out of sync with your hormones or struggling with fertility, I totally get it. I've been there and it can be so frustrating, but I found a delicious way to support your reproductive health. I have developed hormone balancing, fertility boosting chocolate. This isn't just any type of chocolate. It's packed with adaptogens like maca root and antioxidants from cacao and pomegranate. These ingredients can help regulate your hormones and support your preconception health and fertility. You need to download this recipe ASAP, okay? Because it's more than just a treat, it's a powerful way to nourish your body from the inside out. Imagine indulging in a rich, delicious chocolate that not only satisfies your sweet tooth, but also boosts your wellness. Whether you're trying to conceive, balance your hormones, or just crave a healthy indulgence that you get to make from home, where you get to control all of the ingredients and also optimize your health, this recipe is perfect for you. Don't miss out on this tasty, fertility enhancing, optimizing health solution. You can go to biohackingbrittany.com/pages/fertility chocolate and download the recipe for free right now. Go for it. It's just right there waiting for you. It's linked in my show notes. It's linked on my website. You're going to find it super, super easy. So treat yourself to better health, one delicious bite at a time. Yeah, it's pretty scary when you think about it like that. If you have clients come to you and say they are on these types of drugs and they want to get off of them, do you have like a specific protocol that you kind of recommend, or do you add more magnesium in or melatonin to maybe kind of like like ease that transition maybe? What do you recommend in that space?
Yeah, I mean, we always recommend obviously speaking with their doctor first before making any changes with their medicine. But what most doctors usually say is you start low and you go slow. So you taper off the medication. And at the challenge with there, I think depending on the medication, depending on how long they've been on it, there's a lot of factors here. But you don't want to like kind of switch one thing for another thing. So if somebody is heavily dependent on something and then you're like replacing it with supplements, then they could become dependent on those supplements. Not to say that there's not certain supplementation or certain things you can change in your diet that would help sort of support the neurochemistry as you're tapering off drugs, because a lot of these drugs, they deplete the GABA system in the brain. And In the GABA system, it's kind of like, think of it like it's like the brakes in the brain. And when you're on a lot of these drugs for longer than a few weeks, which is really what they're meant to be subscribed, it really starts to play on the GABA system. And there's things like, for instance, kava root. It's kava is amazing. It actually has a reverse tolerance. So the more you take it, the less you need to take to feel the effect. And it actually has been shown to rebuild the GABA system in the brain and really have a sedative effect versus like what most people take is they're depleting the GABA system in the brain, and they're also needing more of it to continue to have that effect. So there definitely are things that people can do, but again, and also detoxing. There's things you could do to support your detox pathways, because a lot of these medications, are pretty toxic. I mean, if you look at the inserts of some of these medications and you see like the side effects as well as the long-term studies of taking these medications, it's pretty scary. So supporting the body to detoxification pathways, I think is a good idea for sure when you're coming off of medication long-term.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's a very holistic approach and it makes a lot of sense. Would you say kind of the same for melatonin? Like I've used melatonin on and off throughout my life. Not It's been quite a while since I've used it. And I always hear mixed reviews about melatonin. Like there's some people who swear that melatonin does not work for them. And then there's some people who take like quite a significant amount. So and melatonin's a hormone, right? So it's kind of like you have to be kind of a bit more careful compared to magnesium, which is like a mineral and you'll kind of excrete it. And you also don't want to take too much magnesium for other reasons. But yeah, like what's your take on melatonin, and do you ever recommend it, or do you think it's like playing with fire? But
Yeah, it's a bit of I mean, again, depending on who you're talking to, and there's a lot of different sleep experts out there that'll say, they're pro melatonin or they're definitely anti melatonin. So here's the thing about melatonin. Like you mentioned, it is a hormone. It used to be regulated in the EU, meaning you need a prescription to actually get it. I'm not sure if it still is. Most of the companies that are producing melatonin, there's discrepancies in the actual dosing of what's actually in those melatonin supplements. I'm kind of more of a naturalist. I look to nature a lot for answers. And our body naturally produces melatonin. So rather than exogenously take melatonin, why not look to support the body's natural systems to produce its own melatonin at the proper timing, like using light therapy or using things like blue blocking glasses or starting to dim half the lights in your home or switching out your bulbs from LEDs to circadian incandescent. There's all these other things you could do before resorting to like blunt force. I'm just going to take like a 5 milligram melatonin supplement. And then there's also, if you look at the meta-analysis studies, Matt Walker, a professor of neuroscience, I believe at UC Berkeley, sleep specialist, in his book, he talks about the meta-analysis on melatonin, and it didn't really show to make a difference for people that were struggling with sleep for onset, meaning it didn't necessarily help people fall asleep faster or sleep deeper. I think using it for cases like jet lag can be really helpful because it's more of like a Zeitgeber. It kind of sets the timing of your circadian clock. It can kind of help support that. But beyond that, I just really think that people can make the lifestyle changes to support their body's natural production of it versus taking it. Although I will say this, it has been shown to have other health benefits. Like it's an antioxidant. And I've heard of doctors using it for people that have different health disorders in large doses with pretty good success. So I think there's a place for melatonin. I just don't necessarily think it's in the world of sleep.
yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's also really difficult to get in Australia. I have some family out there, and I remember when we were visiting a few years ago, they were explaining it to us like you can't just go and buy it as like a supplement, which you can here. And so I always find that so interesting when you are in these different places in the world and something is so regulated like that versus here in Canada or the US. And then it just makes me like double think about it. Like take a double take, like, oh, should we really have like easy access to this? I don't know, maybe not. I do agree with you. I think there's a lot you can do to help your body create its own melatonin, including like optimizing your sleep environment and that type of thing. I'm curious what you recommend for those who kind of have, what's it called? Like running thoughts when they go to bed. So like I've had this where I wake up, and not recently, but like I wake up at 3 a.m. and then I go to the bathroom, whatever, and then I go back to bed, and then I sit in bed and then I start thinking about my to-do list. And I'm like, holy smokes, I have to do all these things in the next month, right? Like personal work. And then at one point, an hour's gone by and I'm still awake thinking about my to-do list. And then at that point, sometimes I just get up and I'm like, well, I might as well start the day now and like get ahead, which is not great, especially when you're not pregnant or when you are pregnant. So what do you recommend for those people who have their mind kind of racing and then like can't really turn it off?
Yeah, you just described like a lot of our clients before they come and work with us in that little bit there. So I have a very strong opinion about this because I've seen the success of implementing this strategy. One of the biggest mistakes people make that have this pattern happening is they actually stay in bed. And the reason why you don't want to stay in bed if you wake up and your mind starts to race is because there's an anchoring effect. So you're actually anchoring a racing mind thinking with your bed. And again, the only things that we want to do in bed is make love to our bed partner and sleep. And so if after, about 20, 25, between like 20 and 30 minutes, if you're still, thinking about all the things, your mind starts to race, you really want to remove yourself from the bed and bedroom and go to a low lit place and have a plan to do something that's going to help you get back into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is a fancy way of saying a resting state, so that you can start to feel sleepy and then get back in bed. And so it's really important to not develop the habit of being awake and having a racing mind and anchoring that sort of situation to your bed. It really is just not helpful at all. Now, it's one of these things a lot of people have like, well, if I'm not in bed, then there's no chance I'm going to fall back asleep. It's like, well, right. And I get that for sure. But really, you just don't want to have that conditioning take place. And, it's one of these things that people then say, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do in the middle of the night. Well, do something that's relaxing, something that's boring. Maybe you're stretching, you listen to a podcast, you're praying, meditating, doing a puzzle. I don't know, some people fold laundry in like low lit. Do something that's just like really mundane. And then once you start to feel sleepy, then you get back into your bed and bedroom and just let sleep happen. Now, if that sleepiness doesn't happen, don't get back in bed. Or after a certain amount of time, you could try. But if you still find you have a racing mind, it's like, okay, again, we don't want to anchor racing mind in bed and bedroom. It's just not productive. So that's what I recommend. You want to spend less time in bed, have a place and have a plan if and when that does happen. And if you are consistent with that, you're eventually going to create a new neural association to your bed, and it'll happen less and less.
I love that. I think that's so smart. The other thing that I was thinking with that is like you're saying, like go to a low lit place for sure. But I've also seen people recommend actually just like writing out your thoughts. Okay, I have this massive to-do list. Let me just write it down on the piece of paper. Okay, now it doesn't live in my head anymore. I have my checklist. Okay, I can go back to sleep because I know tomorrow I can look at this and like tackle it. Do you recommend something like that or even like journaling, I guess?
Yes, yes, so good. I'm so happy you brought that up. The reason that works, Brittany, is actually your hand is a lot slower than your mind. Like our minds can move so fast, but our hands are not that fast. So it does start to slow the mind down. One of the other things I really like to encourage people to experiment with is actually breathing, like conscious breathing, slow breathing, because the breath can anchor us back into our bodies. And a racing mind is happening in your head. So if you can learn to breathe and learn certain techniques like box breathing, or there's a lot of different techniques out there, but something that can get you out of your head and anchored into your body is going to be so helpful for those instances where we have a racing mind. So those are two really powerful, simple, low cost, really no cost tools to use to then begin to slow the mind back down so that the body can get to rest.
Toothpaste. We all need it and use it daily. But have you ever read the ingredients of your toothpaste? or notice the FDA poison warning on there? If not, keep on listening for some surprising information that your dentist might not be sharing with you. Fluoride has long been a common ingredient in many commercial toothpastes, hailed for its ability to prevent cavities. However, recent studies have raised concerns about the potential health risks associated with fluoride exposure. These risks include thyroid dysfunction, dental fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, and potential neurotoxicity. Given these concerns, wellness offers a safer alternative that doesn't compromise our health, yet remains effective. Why choose Wellness toothpaste? It is founded by wellness mama Katie Wells, and Wellness is dedicated to natural health and uses hydroxyapatite instead of fluoride, a game changer in oral care. Here's why it is a better choice. It's fluoride free, eliminating all the health risks that I just talked about. The natural hydroxyapatite formula strengthens enamel and whitens your teeth. Plus, it's crafted from natural ingredients, gentle on gums, and eco-friendly. I love it. I use it all the time. I love the taste of it. And I don't think I will switch to anything else. So make the switch for yourself today to Wellness toothpaste. Visit wellness.com and use code biohackingbrittany for 12% off your order. That's wellness spelled WELLNESSE.com. Safeguard your health with wellness because your smile deserves the best. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so smart. And I'm going to do that now. Like I said, it hasn't happened in a while, but I used to just lay in bed for like an hour or even more. But I think that 20-minute mark is 25 minutes is smart. And just like get it out of your head. Like you got to change what you're thinking about. And sometimes people, it's not even a to-do list, right? It's more of like they're worried about a situation that might be coming up, or there's a big performance they have to do at work, project, whatever it is. And so same thing of let me just write out my thoughts about this or journal, I think can be helpful. The other thing I've done as well is I have a red light beside my bed and I will turn that on in the middle of the night when I'm not sleeping and I will just read my book. And I always try to have some sort of fiction book actually that I read, because if I read health books or business books, it's not great for my brain in the middle of the night. So if I read a fiction book that has nothing to do with my life, usually I can go back to sleep within 20, 30 minutes.
Really good caveat there. Yeah. So I would say if you're getting out of bed and doing that, someplace else would be ideal. But yeah, the content of what you consume is really important. Yeah, for sure. And I will say two more things on this topic that I forgot to mention. You don't really want to look at the clock. Like you really don't want a clock in your bedroom, especially you don't want a phone in your bedroom or a clock in your bedroom, or at least one that where you can actually see the time. And there are some really cool companies that have created some awesome alarm clocks to kind of like make this a feature, so to speak. But the reason why you don't want a clock is as soon as you look at the time, an internal clock gets set. Like, oh my gosh, I only have 3 more hours and then I have to be up. And that creates this sort of hyper arousal, this pressure to get back to sleep. So just feel into your body about what 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes feels like. And if the mind's still going, your heart's going or whatever, you just feel restless, then just get out of bed. But do your best not to look at the clock. And then the other thing is, if you do decide to do a breathing exercise or write out your thoughts and you go to a place and you're doing this as a plan, really important distinction. You're not doing those things to get back to sleep. Just do them to do them. Because if you're doing something so that you're going to go back to sleep, sometimes even though there's this subtle expectation, this subtle attachment, it's enough to create a little hyper arousal, which then releases cortisol and adrenaline, which then can keep you up. So just do it with the mindset of, hey, I'm awake. I'm going to practice this acceptance. And then I'm going to do something, a strategy or a breathing exercise or journaling. And then I'm not doing these things though, so that I can get back to sleep. I'm just doing it because it feels good right now. And then once you feel sleepy, then you just go back into your bed and bedroom and let sleep happen.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is a good point. And it's interesting with the reading that you would even recommend getting out of bed for that, because I definitely have not done that. I always just sit in my bed. But I also read before I go to sleep too. Like Me and my husband always read before we go to bed for like half an hour, maybe even an hour sometimes. So say if we go to bed at like 8:30, we read until 9:30 and then lights out at 9:30. Do you think it's okay to like read in bed before you go to sleep? Or do you think, okay,
Yeah, as long as, again, here's the thing, it's all contextual, and these are not rules. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you, I'm suggesting some things that I found to be helpful for other people. It's really context dependent too. Like somebody that has chronic and onset insomnia, so they have a really hard time falling asleep, I probably wouldn't recommend that. But for somebody that has occasional, sleep challenge maintenance in the middle of the night, no problem. And for you too, even if you wake up in the middle of the night and you turn your red light on, you're reading your fiction book, if you're able to get back to sleep, if you're able to initiate sleep with under 20 minutes, then, and that happens like once in a while, then like no big deal. But again, I'm speaking to the people that this happens like every single night and they're staying in bed and they're tossing and turning, or they're doing things in their bed to try to get back to sleep, like reading or meditating or whatever. That's not really helpful.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you see any trends or maybe differences between men and women who come to you who are maybe struggling with insomnia, but also those who are just trying to like get that last 10%, like optimizing their sleep?
We really focus on serving people that they've tried all the different things. They're usually taking a sleeping medication. They're pretty much at the last end of the rope. So we're not really, I would say like the other side of that, the people that are looking to optimize the 10%, like that would be me. That's that I'm in that 10% bucket. And I do share content on YouTube and on like podcasts like this of like what I'm doing to sort of do that. But the clients that we work with at Sleep Science Academy, they're really the ones that are in that other bucket where they're trying everything under the sun. They're still not sleeping. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of worry. And we're guiding them to restore their natural sleep.
Right. And do you see a difference, like if men and women come to you between that, or is there, it's kind of just the same?
It's kind of the same. I mean, so here's the caveat here is the second part of a woman's life, they go through this metamorphosis, right? And that metamorphosis is called menopause. And about 60% or more of women experience really challenging sleep during that phase. And so there are some, obviously, men don't go through that necessarily, at least that I know of. And so there are some differences in that department where there's things that you can do to sort of support the female transitionary period to help sleep. But outside of that period, it's really the same. There's not really that big of a difference beyond. There's some really strong guidelines and there's some really practical tools that when people use, they're able to sleep. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman.
Yeah, that makes sense for menopause. Like the hormone fluctuations and the changes can be so significant for some women. And I have quite a few women who are going through menopause who listen to the show. And it's hard when you're dealing with hot flashes and these symptoms that are so uncomfortable. I couldn't imagine like having hot flashes in a bed and then trying to sleep. You know what I mean? Like that sounds terrible. So, yeah, I guess there's just more hormonal support needed in a holistic way during that time.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's like the same sort of caveat when we're talking about young parents. It's that time is going to pass. What we don't want to happen is you get so worked up about not sleeping and how terrible it feels not to sleep that it becomes like your hormones eventually get balanced and then you're still not sleeping. That's what we don't want. We don't want parents where the parents are not sleeping, but now their kids are sleeping. And we don't want women on the other side of menopause that are not sleeping and it has nothing to do with their hormones, right? And that's sometimes people in both cases can fall into these kind of patterns where it continues beyond where it started. And that's when you really got to look under the hood and say, okay, what's going on here from a psychological and behavioral standpoint that has your body not doing the natural thing that it knows how to do, which is sleep.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So your approach, your dynamic sleep recalibrating, is that just kind of this holistic approach that you're talking about and this mind body connection that you kind of educate people on? Or is there like more to it as well?
Yeah, it is the name I call what we do at Sleep Science Academy. which is essentially, it's the best of approach where I pulled from all of these different places to help people naturally recalibrate their sleep system. So some of the places we pulled from: mindfulness, CBTI, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy techniques, neurolinguistic programming. There's all these different sort of places and things that I've studied, as well as just general health and life coaching, to then help the body's natural rhythm become synced. And I just call it dynamic sleep recalibrating, because to explain every little aspect of where we pull all these different techniques and tools, we would literally be on this conversation for another 2 hours. So I'm like, let me just give it a name. And the name I chose was dynamic sleep recalibrating, because it is dynamic in that we're pulling from all these different places. And what we're doing is we're just recalibrating your body's natural ability to sleep. And it's a different and unique approach, because a lot of times people either take a solely physical approach or a sole mental approach. And they're kind of set in one ideology or psychology. Whereas what I found to be useful is what Bruce Lee has this amazing quote. He says, take what's useful and take it from wherever you can find it. And that's kind of the approach that I took with creating this sort of system, if you will, is just there's not really one thing that works for everyone. So you need to pull from several different places to support somebody where they're at to then get them a result.
I love that. I love a holistic approach to things. It just makes sense, right? Like it just makes sense to kind of tackle the issue from multiple angles versus being stuck in one ideology, like you said. So I think that's really smart. If people want to join your academy or work with you or connect with you, how can they do that and where can they find you?
Yeah, the easiest way, honestly, is just to go to our website, sleepscienceacademy.com. That's sleepscienceacademy.com. And then on social channels, Sleep Science Academy on YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn and all those things. But I would say that would be a good place. Just go to the website and we have some resources there. We have like a sleep quiz, free sleep workshop, or you can just book a call with someone from my team. They can share a little bit more about the specifics of our program.
Amazing. Okay. I will link that in my show notes and on my website so everyone can find you really easily. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I love this. I learned a lot and it's very encouraging for my lack of sleep that's coming up. So,
well, yeah, I wish you the best. And I'd love to kind of check in with you as you're going through and see what you're learning, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot you'll learn and discover. And I would say there are, like we were talking before the podcast, there are specific baby sleep coaches. There's quite a few of them out there, actually. And there's several different approaches. So I'd be very curious to see what approach resonates with you, what you and your husband decide to do, and kind of pick your brain and hear what you're learning through that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't dove in yet. There's, like you said, there's so many books and recommendations on all of these different ways to get your baby to sleep throughout the night. So I don't know. Future Brittany problem is the way that I look at that right now. So
well, that's good. You know what? That's perfect.
Yeah.
Just take it as it comes and don't get overworked up about it. And advice that I always hear parents say, they're like, listen, you got to just do what's right, what you feel is best for you and your baby. There's not really, everyone's going to have their input and tell you, hey, we this worked for us, or we did this method. At the end of the day, you just got to do what resonates most with you and your lifestyle and your values. So
I love that. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Okay. And yeah, thank you for this. I know my listeners definitely got a lot out of it and I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active. My handle is @biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.